which are MFI certified. So if you pass that course, you will be an MFI certified worker. And you can also get the organization credit certified by the Grameen Foundation itself. And Grameen, since being a global name right now, so if we get certified by the foundation, so this will also help building the credibility of the brand itself. So that is it. Thank you.
Questions to the group? Well, I'll first of all I'll commend the group very much because you handled not just the micro aspects of the case very well and suggested avenues. Do you study microfinance in any of your courses here? No. This was entirely something that you kind of came up with. So very good. And you also studied the transformational part of it very well. So thank you very much. It was indeed a very good and happy presentation. Pity that we didn't have questions from the group here. Before I just not exactly a commentary on your presentation, but I'd like to add two little dimensions. One is that you mentioned it in passing. Microfinance, of course, has been popularized worldwide now by Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus. But I'm sure when AMM started in Mumbai and Pune, it didn't have that kind of, halo around it. But in the succeeding years, it's acquired that. It's a very valid instrument, microcredit, microfinance, to basically make sure that it's much more than a financial tool, which is something I'm sure everybody here would have gathered by now, also from the presentation, but even otherwise, that microcredit and microfinance are far more than a financial tool. It's actually a way of empowering people. That's, I think, the fundamental truth of it. And Grameen Bank has proven to the world that this is very much possible. We'll come back later in today's class to that aspect of the whole thing. The other thing that I'd like to say is that there is another point that in India today, this whole microfinance revolution has been taken a step further. You will actually hopefully, because keep fingers crossed, one of your last presentations in the month of November will be from Mr. Chandrasekhar Ghosh, founder of Bandhan. Bandhan started as a microfinance organization, and today they've done the final linkage, they've become a commercial bank. So therefore, and it's been one of the fastest growing scheduled banks of the country with almost 1,000 branches. They celebrated, I think, their third anniversary just a month ago, and it's just going great guns. They're employing almost 50,000 people. So so that last linkage of really becoming a bank, that is something that many microfinance institutions dream of but never end up doing. So the cost of credit, the cost of finance itself drops, because when you become a bank, you borrow from the retail customer and from projects over there. Okay? Is this working? So those are aspects, but before I go on to this, I'll just add a few. Let's see whether this works. So a few comments, just to, some of it you'll find common, but I had no means of, have you sent the presentation in? Huh? Because I don't think I got it. So basically, somebody else was supposed to do it. Can you send it in now, please? So I have no means of knowing before I came to the class what you could present. Therefore I have just, kind of put my own little comments. Sorry. Now, you saw the picture of Padma Shri Premapura. For those uninitiated, Padma Shri is one of the high civilian awards of this country. Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, Padma Vibhushan. Padma Vibhushan being the highest, Padma Bhushan being a second one, Padma Shri is the third one. So this lady is a freedom fighter. She's very charismatic, and because of her work, she's got this award called Padma Shri. And of course, she's being helped by her husband, a very famous trade union leader, Dada Pura. And as they say, it's for poor and destitute women. So that's the overall thing. Microfinance is incidental. It's not the whole and soul of the organization. Alright, so in the beginning, it was instituted to help poor and destitute women, and microfinance was a tool. It was not the whole of the organization. And as you mentioned in the presentation itself, 7 years later, after the inception of the organization, when Dada Purao died, then change setting. Okay? And then their daughter, Dr. Medha Purao, got married, changed the name, Medha Purao Samant. She initially helped from the outside for many years and then took charge of the organization. So this is the story of how it started.
Put down.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yes. So I've just quoted from the case some of these statements. Okay. This is now Dr. Samant, the daughter. And I think this bit the group quoted. It said, although completely enthused by AMM's mission and objectives, she had different opinions about how the organization should be run. So right when her parents were alive and the organization was functioning smoothly, the daughter, who was an outsider to the organization, started developing certain other perspectives of how it could be run. Of course, she couldn't give shape to it while they were alive out of respect. So this again is the, her statement. In the initial period, which is something the group echoed, in the initial period of any social venture, however it's constituted, personal charisma of the founder is key. Because the personal charisma drives the organization, personal charisma moves the beneficiaries closer to the organization. Otherwise, why would the beneficiaries be attracted? It's not advertising, it's not a brand creation. So that act of brand creation, if you will, for a corporate organization is almost replicated here through the personal charisma of the founder. Now again here, as the case says, unlike her mother, she wanted to provide a proper regulatory framework for the organization. So it's easy to create an organization. When you sustain the organization, these things become important. And also it says, the case says, she wanted to create a structure where each employee would be guided by processes. This came in towards the end of this presentation when we talked of transformational leadership, and expected standards and enough scope for leadership development and career growth. Now this bit could very well stand for a corporate organization. This need not be just an NGO. But at the end of the day, whether it's an NGO or a social enterprise, whether it's for-profit or not for-profit, it is an organization. It needs to sustain, and therefore people have expectations. Processes are important. You need to set standards. People should be groomed for leadership development, and there should be growth. So now, the biggest question that has bothered, you've met now so many NGOs. You've met them here, you're now meeting them at their base. What is it that bothers everybody? How do we fund it? This is one fundamental question. So again, I've just borrowed from the case. It says, every social organization depends heavily on grants, donations initially. But now the question is, but how long could one continue to rely on these sources alone? I think this is a key point that comes in, not in the initial euphoria when you create an NGO, but as time goes by, this is a question that bothers people who actually run an NGO. How do I do it? Now if you take, let's say, Narayan Rudel, you've done that case just a little while back. There, the founder is somebody who's highly educated, And therefore, he has been able to integrate charisma while over time building a process-driven organization. So he's been able to combine his head and his heart. But many of the NGOs, including Touch World, for instance, the first NGO you met, what did the lady tell you? I basically think with my heart. That was how she started. And how all these things will come into place, I don't know. How I'll fund funds, I don't know. Who will succeed me, I don't know. Some of you are working with Touch World, I met you the other day. But these are questions that bother the NGO. So fundamentally, to sustain what you need human beings to carry on the work, you need a strong succession plan, and you need funds. So here, the point here is the human being was in place. They were very lucky, Dada Purao and Prema Purao, that their daughter actually followed in their footsteps. Remember, the daughter had a very secure bank job. And in those days, a bank job in India, believe me, meant something. It's not like today, the bankers or the people who work in the bank, I wonder what they do, but that's a different story. But way back, we had probationary officers. You had to sit an exam to get into a bank. And I know a lot of people who would not get into civil services, but the next rank thing was becoming a probationary officer in a bank, and it was considered a very, very prestigious thing. So she was a bank officer with a very good bank. She gave that up and she joined this organization. The other thing, the point that this lady is making is very important. She just says, and I quote her, I like the term social business. She was a person who realized that NGOs, you cannot run an organization with love and pleasure. You need money. And when you need money, you can ask around. But most people will tell you that I will only give you this much. It's very, very difficult to find resources. You remember our good professor, Dr. Sujit. Some of you will meet him again a couple of days later. What did he tell you? He started from that cowshed, remember the picture of the cowshed? And then slowly he went back to Belgium with a begging bowl, and his university, the Louvain University, helped him. And then since then, various people come, the interns come, things happen. He gets donations from somewhere. And over a period of time, bit by bit by bit, he's been able to grow. But so therefore, this is also important. So slowly you will find NGOs gravitating slowly but surely towards a model of social business. So what are the challenges in terms of organization? This probably, I think, you touched on it as a group. You will find linking independent setups with their own legal structure. When you have separate setups, this was one of the last slides in the case, how do you actually link them? It's very important because they are independent entities, but it's important to link them into the greater Annapurna Parivar. So that was a very important thing. This you've talked about, developing the suitable delivery model and technology bit also. And the point here, which you've talked about, I don't want to dwell on it, from moving from a person-driven to a process-driven organization. Alright, towards the end of the case, this was also quoted. Erstwhile colleagues considered her foolish for leaving a cozy and secure job. Remember, it's not today. Way back, people were not that entrepreneurial, at least in newly independent India. Oh, sorry, there's a typo here. It should say, how else would I learn so much from life? How else would I learn so much from life? So when she was asked, what did you gain by doing this? This is what she had said, and therefore it's very commendable. But so that this carried on. So I'll start to say this, and then what I'll do is I'll quickly move to. Sorry, there's another one. There is the second one. I want you to. Have you ever heard organization. It's an NGO. You heard? Anybody? BRAC. It's the biggest, sorry? It's one of the biggest, probably the biggest NGO in the world. It happens to be in Bangladesh. You're right, it's the biggest NGO in Bangladesh, but it also is probably still, I've not taken the latest statistics, for a long time, it's been the biggest NGO of the world. In terms of as an organization, it's the second largest in Bangladesh. The first employer being the government, the second employer being BRAC. BRAC started around the time of the liberation of Bangladesh or the creation of Bangladesh in 1971. And I think it is Bangladesh Rural basically. So it's basically to make sure that how do you kind of rebuild a nation from ruins. You know, Bangladesh, there was what they call a genocide when in the moment of its birth, millions of people were killed. So how would the country go about rebuilding itself? And that's how BRAC was born. So this is a question, if you look it up, what accounts for the success of BRAC? It's the largest NGO in the world. First, they talk about the skill, vision, humility, and sustained commitment of the founder. Each one of these words are very easy English words. There is something to be said for each one of the words. One is the skill. See, the first is the vision. All the people you've met in this course, by and large, almost 90%, have shown you a very different kind of vision. It's not obvious. What they went about doing was not very obvious. Take any one of them, whether it is Switch On, Touch World, Indian Institute of Mother and Child, name any. All right? It's been Pratham, Narayan Rudayalay, Moinapur. It's all had a very sharp, decisive and different vision. That's something that distinguishes good NGOs. Second is the skill and dexterity. Without that, you can't put this vision into practice. The third is, and I'll come to this a little later, sustained commitment. That is very important. It is for any organization to sustain, including an NGO, the commitment cannot be for a day, for a month, for a year. It needs to be sustained. So that passion needs to be sustained over a very long period of time. Because the linkages with people are so high, you cannot switch off in this organization. In companies, you can sell off. You can dissociate, you can start a new company. But NGOs is something, you take a life's decision. If you've done it, it almost lives with you till the day you die. You connect with poor, the destitute, the people who don't understand your language, the people who don't necessarily belong to your social class. But when they connect with you, they will not leave you come what may. So therefore, even if you want to leave, being in the NGO world, it means you don't opt out. You cannot opt out. In business, you can. You can sell off your company, you can do something very, very different. But in an NGO, it's almost impossible. The fourth one I'd like to talk about is the third one here, the word humility. Why do you think this is important? Why is the word humility important in this context for an NGO? Yes?
Maybe the task is huge, so you have to admit that maybe you will not see the end.
The task is huge, you may not be able to see it to the end. Yes, that's important. Yes, what else? Yes?
To build a connect with the people whom you want to serve.
Absolutely, to build a connect with the people. See, if you look down on them because of higher education, more money, or the fact that you have a vision, and they are just the poor and the destitute, you don't connect anymore. If you don't connect, you don't build. So just in order to build, you need to be humble. Any other perspectives? Anyone? There's another very important perspective, a utilitarian aspect of humility. But can you guess that? Yes?
It attracts the people.
Sorry?
It attracts the people towards you. So
Yes, yes, it attracts people, but one more, utilitarian aspect. Yes?
humble, you don't have a lot of, you don't have very high expectancies in terms of way of life, I don't know, money.
Yes, yes, true.
And since you have to build with only what you have.
You're right, yes, but there's more. There's something else.
You're easier to work with.
Yes, I'll tell you. You probably not get there. The one thing is that as you realized in the last several presentations, be it whichever way you work with it, the whole thing, you have to work with government. In one of my presentations, you would have seen the role of NGO. You cannot escape working with the government. Once upon a time, this was the domain of the government. It was not even left to civil society. But today, even if you looked at Pratham, finally what did they end up doing? They are working with government, they're catalyzing government initiatives, because then it's a win-win situation. Government has the resources, government can stop you. So if you look at India today, so many NGOs are being stopped by government. Part of it is facts, part of it is fiction. What does the fiction come from? Oh, he thinks no end of himself. So the government stops you. If you need to work with government, you need to go in pretending to be very humble if you are not humble. Because the government, by definition, at least in countries like ours, in third world or developing countries, the government is a body of people who think a lot about themselves and for whom power has gone to their heads. They do not respect the other kind of leadership which is connecting with people. They see them as rivals. So you need to be humble. If you would have followed the story of Muhammad Yunus, you would have seen that successive governments in Bangladesh have resented his charisma. They don't get along with him. He doesn't get along with them. But he bypasses that because he can lecture in a London School of Economics or at the Nobel Summit or at the United Nations. So they can't say much, but very quietly they make it difficult. So the end objective is defeated. The end objective of working with it. So that's important. So this is one reason why BRAC is able to be the most important NGO organization in Bangladesh. Because they do not oppose the government. So you don't know the founder of BRAC, you see. You know Muhammad Yunus of Grameen Bank. He's so visible. But these guys are not visible. They are understated. They are soft. You can't discern them. Then they talk about listening and learning organization. So that's of course an obvious one. They were a relief organization. They actually started off like that because millions of people were displaced. It was nation building. But now they talk of self-reliance and sustainability. And look at this. Self-financing and small user fees. So, little drops make the ocean is the second one, and the first one is self-financing. Don't continuously look for government funds or big money. NGOs rarely get big money. If they get once in a while, it is by stroke of luck. It is not automatic, it shouldn't even be presumed. So, look at this. How does the government look at it? BRAC is the second largest employer in Bangladesh. Helps 38 million citizens. It's not a small number by any stretch of the imagination. And the other thing the government says is that it empowers women. Something that's very important in terms of doing this. So once again you see how does BRAC manage? Humility and low profile of leadership, eschews aggressive advocacy, reduces the government's dependency on foreign aid donors. Now, you look at this sentence, reduces the government's dependency on foreign aid donors. What does that mean? It means this is what they tell the government, that you work together with us, you need not go with the begging bowl to foreign governments. Because every foreign government, when they give you something, they also ask for many unsaid things in return. So then, of course, reinforcing democratic civil society, and this management talent that they develop is again used for developmental work in Bangladesh in collaboration with government. So this empowerment that happens, these people are again employed by government. So I'm indebted for my education and talent development to BRAC, and I actually work with the government. So what happens is, I'm grateful to both. So I link both. Okay? So this is another little thing. Alright, so one is they target at the poorest, particularly women. They work through village organizations. One of their key areas of work is health services. You know, like Dr. Deb the other day was telling you about, that our health services are so abysmal. This has been the focus of this organization, PRAC. And that's why Bangladesh, this is one of the reasons, not that's why, but this is one of the reasons why Bangladesh is further down the road from India in terms of achieving the UN Millennium Development Goals. Mind you, we became independent 72 years ago. Bangladesh became independent not even 50 years ago. It's 1971. But they have, you know, leapfrogged over our development in terms of reaching out to the poorest of the poor faster, because this is almost an NGO-run country. We as a country are driven still by private enterprise, which means, you know, large businesses. We have Reliance, we have Tatas, we have Birlas, we have Adanis, we have so many people. In Bangladesh, it is NGOs, and by definition, NGOs reach out to help the poorest. So therefore, in terms of growth of the poorest, they are ahead of us. We may have created more, you know, growth in terms of dollars, more in terms of industry, more in terms of whatever. But in terms of reaching out, they have been better at it. Okay? So, health services and education in rural villages. And this also is tied up with microfinance. And they work, in 2003, I don't have the latest statistics, in 2003 they worked in 60,000 of 86,000 villages. So, and now that has grown, so virtually all of Bangladesh.
Previous slides, another slide, yeah, right.
Oh yeah, sorry. So look at their statistics. I don't want to read this out to you. Look at this. Sorry, this is field offices. This is wrong. 1,500 field offices, 14 training centers, 113,000 village organizations. These are 1.6 million clients in 2003, 122,000 health workers covering 1/4 of Bangladesh, 550,000 patients in 100 health centers, 7,000 community nutrition programs, 34,000 village schools. This is way back in time, okay? Very dated statistics, but it tells you that you do not have a BRAC in India or in many other countries. But this is one thing to tell you, that countries like ours need NGOs and successful NGOs far more than we, well, not far more than we need corporates, but they have to come up alongside. This is something which we lack. So this is the larger picture. Then I'll go to a little bit the story of Ramakrishna. I'd like to talk about in this context two important things. One is India versus Bangladesh. I already told you the story of 72 years versus 48 odd years or 47 years. So we were independent 25 years before, but we didn't do much. Sorry. Now, if you look at successful NGOs in India, I'll talk about three people in India who set up large, what you could call NGOs. One is Mahatma Gandhi. Didn't really set up an NGO, but set up the Khadi movement. The Khadi movement was the single biggest social movement which actually empowered village weavers. Impoverished weavers were empowered simply by this one act of the charkha, which was part of the Congress flag for decades before it got replaced by Indira Gandhi's hand. But the charkha signified that upliftment from the village level of village weavers. But when Gandhi died, the Khadi movement was nationalized, taken over by the government. The Khadi movement today has become, of course for natural reasons, more of a fashion statement than anything else, but it has ceased to be the social movement that it represented. If Mahatma Gandhi was alive, perhaps, India's village development history would have been different. Whether he would have built NGOs or what, I don't know. But presumably it would have been very different. It would not have been a concentration on heavy industry and things which Nehru envisioned and championed more than Gandhi did. The other casualty that has happened is Tagore. You'll learn more on 23rd.